The Weston Game, Chapter 28. And then. Turtle never told. She went to the library every Saturday afternoon. She explained, which was partly true. Make your move, Turtle. You don't want to be late for the wedding. The ceremony was held in Shinhu's restaurant. Grace Wexler, recovered from a world record hangover, draped a white cloth over the liquor bottles and set a spray of roses on the bar. No drinks would be served today. Radiant in her wedding gown of white heirloom lace, the bride walked down the aisle, past the tables of well wishes, on the arm of Jake Wexler. Mr. Who, the best man, beamed with pride at her light footsteps as he supported the knee-knocking, nervous groom. A fine white line of a scar marked Angela's cheek, but she looked content and lovely as ever in her pale blue bridesmaid's gown. The other bridemaid wore pink and yellow with matching crutches. The guests cried during the wedding and laughed during the reception. Flora Bumbutch smiled and cried at the same time. You did such a good job altering the wedding dress, Baba, Turtle said, which made the dressmaker cry even harder. A toast to the bride and groom, Jake announced, raising his glass of ginger ale to Crow and Otis Amber. The heirs of Uncle Sam Westing clinked glasses with the members of the Good Salvation Soup Kitchen, sobered up for the happy occasion. To Crow and Otis Amber. Apartment 4D was bare. For the last time, Judge Ford stared out the side window of the cliff where the Westing house once stood. She would never solve the Westing puzzle. Perhaps it was just as well. Her debt would finally be repaid, with interest. The money she would pay for the education of another youngster, just as Sam Westing paid for hers. Hi, Judge Ford. I came to see you. Goodbye, Chris said, wheeling himself through the door. Hello, Chris. That was nice of you, but why aren't you studying? Where's your tutor? She looked at the binoculars hanging from his neck. You haven't been bird watching again, have you? There will be plenty of time for birds later. First, you must catch up on your studies, if you want to get into a good school. Good heavens, she was beginning to sound like Mr. Who. Will you come see me? Chris asked. It gets sort of lonely with Theo away at college. The judge gave him one of her rare smiles. He was a bright youngster, real smart, Sandy had said. He had a good future. Sandy had said that too. He needed her influence and the extra money, but she might smother him with her demands. I'll see you when I can, and I'll write to you, Chris, I promise. Whose little footsies, patent pending, was selling well in drugstores and shoe repair shops. Once we capture the Milwaukee market, I'll take you to China, James Who promised his business partner. Okay, Madam Who replied, toting up accounts on her abacus. No hurry. She had many friends in Sunset Towers now, and no more cooking, no more tight dress slit up the thigh. Her husband had brought her a nice pantsuit to wear when they called on customers, and for her birthday, Doug had given her one of his medals to wear around her neck. The secretary to the president of Schultz Sausages was back on the job, her ankle mended. Sido Pulaski had discarded her crutches. She had all the attention she could handle without them. After all, she was an heiress now. It wasn't polite to ask how much, but everyone knew Sam Westing had millions. Of course, she could retire to Florida, she said, but what would poor Mr. Schultz do without her? And then, one unforgettable Friday, Mr. Schultz himself took her to lunch. Jake Wexler had given up his private practice, both private practices, now that he had been appointed consultant in the governor's inquiry panel for the state lottery, thanks to the recommendation by Judge Ford. Grace was proud of him, and his daughters were doing well. In fact, everything was fine, just fine. Who's on First was a great success. Grace Wexler, the new owner, offered free meals to the sports figures who came to town, and everyone wanted to eat where the athletes ate. The restaurant's one windowless wall was covered with autographed photographs of the Brewers, Packers, and Bucks. Grace straightened to the framed picture of a smiling champion, signed to Grace W. Wexler, who serves the #1 food in town, Doug Who. She certainly was a lucky woman, a respected restaurateur, wife of a state official, and mother of the cleverest kid who ever lived. Turtle was going to be somebody someday. A narrow scar remained and would always remain on Angela's cheek. It was slightly raised, and she had developed a habit of running her fingers along it as she pored over her books. Enrolled in college again, she lived at home to save money for the years of medical school ahead. She had returned the engagement ring to Denton Deer. She had not seen him since Crow's wedding. Ed Plum had stopped calling after 10 refusals. Angela had neither the time nor the desire for a social life, what with studying. Her weekly shopping date with Seidel and Sundays spent helping Crow and Otis in the soup kitchen. Study, 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 Turtle said. Angela saw little of her little sister, who was either at school in Flora Bumbach's apartment or at the library. Hi, Turtle, how come you're so happy today? The stock market jumped 25 points. The newlyweds, Crow and Otis Amber, moved into the apartment above the Good Salvation soup kitchen. The storefront mission had been renovated and expanded with the money from the inheritance. Grace Wexler had supervised the decorations. Copper posts hung from the ceiling, the pews were padded with flowered cushions and fitted with hymn book pockets and drop leaf trays. There was meat in the soup and fresh bread every day. Chapter 29. 5 years passed. The former delivery boy danced into the Who's new lakefront home. Give a cheer, the Ambers are here. Otis came to celebrate Doug's victory, wearing the old zippered jacket and aviator's helmet. He had even let the stubble grow on his chin. The only thing missing was his delivery bike. They had come in on a soup kitchen van. Thank you for your generous donation, Mr. Who. God bless you, Crow said. Otis and I distributed the inner souls among the people. It helped their suffering greatly. She looked down, her skin pulled tight against the fragile bones as she wore black. Mr. Who, on the other hand, was stouter and less angry. In fact, he was almost happy. Business was booming. Milwaukee loved Who's little foot ease, and so did Chicago and New York and Los Angeles, but he still hadn't taken his wife to China. Theo Theodorakis, graduate of journalism school, club reporter, held the newspaper hot off the press. Olympic hero comes home. 4 columns were devoted to the history and achievement of the gold medal winner who had set a new record for the 1,500-meter run. Theo had not actually written the article on the local hero, but he had sharpened pencils for the reporter who did. Take a bow, Doug, Mr. Who said, beaming. Doug leaped on a table and thrust his index fingers high in the air. I'm number 1, he shouted. The Olympic gold medal hung from his neck. Confetti from the parade dotted his hair. The Westing heirs cheered. Hello, Jake. I'm so glad you could come. Sonny, as Madam Who was now called, said, shaking the hand of the chairman of the State Gambling Commission. Boom, Jake Wexler replied. Hello, Angela. Denton Deer had grown a thick mustache. He was a neurologist. He had never married. Hello, Denton. Angela's gold hair was tied up in a knot in the nape of her neck. She wore no makeup. She was completing her 3rd year of medical school. It's been a long time. Remember me? Seidel Pulaski wore a red and white polka dot dress and leaned on the red and white polka dot crutch. She had sprained her knee dancing a tango at an office party. How could I ever forget you, Miss Pulaski? Denton said. I'd like you to meet my fiancé, Conrad Schultz, president of Schultz Sausages. How do you do? Judge Ford, I'd like you to meet my friend Shirley Staver. Chris Theodorakis was in his junior year at college. A medication recently discovered kept his limbs steady and his speech well controlled. He sat in a wheelchair, as he always would. Hello, Shirley, the judge said. Chris had written so much about you. I'm sorry I'm such a poor correspondent, Chris. I found myself in a tangle of cases this past month. She was a judge on the United States Circuit Court of Appeals. Chris and I were both chosen to go on a bird-watching tour to Central America this summer, Shirley said. Yes, I know. For old time's sake, Grace Wexler catered the party herself and passed along the guests with a tray of appetizers. She owned a chain of 5 restaurants now. Who's on first, who's on second, who's on third, who's on fourth, and who's on fifth? What's that attractive young woman talking with, Flora Bumbach? Theo asked. Why, that's my daughter, Turtle. She's really grown up, hasn't she? 2nd year of college, and she's only 18. Calls herself T.R. Wexler now. T.R. Wexler was radiant. Earlier that day, she had won her first chess game from the master. Chapter 30. The end? Turtle spent the night at the bedside of 85-year-old Julian R. Eastman. T.R. Wexler had a master's degree in business administration, an advanced degree in corporate law, and had served 2 years as legal counsel to the Westing Paper Products Corporation. She had made $1 million in the stock market, lost it all, then made $5 million more. This is it, Turtle. His voice was weak. You can't die before my eyes, Sandy, and I wouldn't believe it. Show some respect. I can still change my will. No, you can't. I'm your lawyer. That's the thanks I get for that expensive education. How's the judge? Judge Ford has been appointed to the United States Supreme Court. What do you know? Honest Josie Joe on the Supreme Court. She was a smart kid, too, but she never once beat me at chess. Tell me about the others, Turtle. How's poor saintly Crow? Crow and Otis are still slopping soup, Turtle fibbed. Crow and Otis Amber had died 2 years ago, within a week of each other. And that funny woman with the painted crutches, what's her name? Saito Pulaski Schultz? She and her husband moved to Hawaii. Angela keeps in touch. Angela, how's your pretty sister? The bomber? Turtle never knew he knew. Angela was an orthopedic surgeon. Julian R. Eastman was an old man, but suddenly his mind too was old. For the first time since the Weston game, he was wearing the dentures with the chipped front tooth. He had turned back to his happiest time. Sandy was dying. He was really dying. Turtle held back her tears. Angela and Denton Deer are married. They have a daughter named Alice. Alice? Doesn't Flora Bumbutch call you Alice? She used to. She calls me TR, as everyone does. How's the dressmaker, Turtle? Tell me about them. Tell me about all of them. Flora Bumbutch had given up dressmaking when she moved in with Turtle years ago. Ababa's well. Everyone is well. Mr. and Mrs. Theodorakis, remember that they had the coffee shop in Sunset Towers? They retired to Florida. Chris and his wife Shirley teach ornithology at the university. They're both professors. Chris discovered a new subspecies on his last trip to South America. It's named after him. The something Christos parrot. I like that. And the track star, has he won any more medals? 2 Olympic golds in a row. Doug is a sports announcer on television. And how's Jimmy Who's invention going? I gave him the idea, you know. It looks like a real winner, Sandy. Mr. Who, too, was dead. Sunny Who finally made her trip to China, but returned to carry on the business. And tell me about my niece, Gracie Winkerplopple. Does she still think she's a decorator? Mom went into the restaurant business, has a chain of 10. 9 are quite successful. I keep telling her to give up Who's on 10th, to cut her losses, but she's stubborn as ever. I guess she hangs on to it because it's Madison, to be near Dad. It's in Madison, to be near Dad. He's now in the state crime commissioner. He's well qualified for that job. And your husband, how's his writing coming along? He had remembered. Theo's doing fine. The first novel sold about 6 copies, but it's got great reviews. He's just about finished with his second book. And when are you two going to have children? Someday. Turtle and Theo had decided against having children because of the possibility of inheriting Chris's disease. If it's a boy, we'll name him Sandy, and if it's a girl, well, I guess we'll name her Sandy too. The old man's voice was barely audible now. Did you say Angela had a little girl? Yes, Alice. She's 10 years old. Is she pretty like her mother? I'm afraid not. She looks a lot like you and me. Turtle? Yes, Sandy. Turtle. I'm right here, Sandy. She took his hand. Turtle, tell Crow to pray for me. His hand turned cold. Not smooth, not waxy, just very, very cold. Turtle turned to the window. The sun was rising out of Lake Michigan. It was tomorrow. It was the 4th of July. Julian R. Eastman was dead, and with him died Wendy Winkerplopple, Sam W. Westing, Barney Northrup, and Sandy McSuthers. And with him died a little of Turtle. No one, not even Theo, knew her secret. T.R. Wexler was understandably sad over the death of the chairman of the board of the Westing Paper Products Corporation. She had been his legal advisor. She would inherit his stock and serve as the director of company until the day she, too, would be elected chairman of the board. Veiled in black, she hurried from the funeral services. It was Saturday, and she had an important engagement. Angela brought her daughter Alice to the Wexler Theodorakis mansion to spend Saturday afternoons with her aunt. There she was, waiting for her in the library. Baba had tied back red ribbons and one long pigtail down her back. Hi there, Alice, T.R. Wexler said. Ready for a game of chess?